Alright, welcome to this 5th episode of TACTALK. I'm your host, Alden Morris. This is officially Season 2, Episode 5. So, we're still waiting on a couple of different guests to get scheduled onto the show at their most convenient time, so that way, with my schedule, because I get my children every other day at this point, so we're going to be going to court on the 18th to kind of schedule up a new 50-50 custody plan since their mother decided to move out of county. It makes it harder for me to be able to juggle work and juggle my children and juggle all my extracurricular things that I do on the side here besides working for Beast Combat Systems as a content manager and being able to be the host of this show. So, but I make it work. We're getting it good. One thing I wanted to share today with you guys is because I've been meaning to do this for a while. All of Season 1 I actually meant to do this, but I never got a chance to because some of the topics are so groundbreaking and some of them were so based on current affairs and politics, that now that we have a slow run, and I've got about 3 or 4 different guests that I want on the show that haven't been able to schedule yet, and we wanted to do a show today anyways, we're going to go over, especially if you live in the Washington State area, Mount Rainier eruption zones, and how to survive Mount Rainier eruption. So what I've done is, a couple years ago, and actually I'll tell you the exact date, on November 18th, oh, sorry about that, that is not supposed to be going on. November 18th, 2015, I made a video called Surviving a Mount Rainier Eruption. You can find this on my YouTube channel at Alden Morris YouTube. Just go to YouTube, type in the search engine Alden Morris. It's ALDEN MORRIS. To be more specific, you can type in Alden Morris Mount Rainier and it'll pull it up for you. I've done quite a few videos on Mount Rainier. That's because I consider it my mountain. I even got a tattoo of Mount Rainier on my arm, part of my sleeve here. And so one thing I love about my mountain is the fact that it's a sleeping giant, and it will erupt one day, probably in my lifetime. I've had dreams of this thing erupting. That's why I've been so adamant about making these videos. And survival, this is how I got started. If you ever wonder why I'm into the survival scene, why I'm into that whole shit hit the fan, militia type preparedness, it's because of Mount Rainier. It's because literally if Mount Rainier were to go off, we're all screwed. I mean, you're not getting out of here on I-5 South, I-5 North, Highway 10 East, like none of that. So you can travel west, hit some boats, and get out of here out through ocean. But other than that, ash flow, lahars, you're gonna have quite a bit of a scare here. So what I'm gonna do is there is an actual video. What I've done in the videos, I've included animatronics, not animatronics, animations that show the actual lahar zones that if Mount Rainier were to erupt, where they would go, what rivers, what highways, what towns and cities they'd hit first. So if you could do, and I will leave the link to the YouTube video here on the YouTube talk show, or TACTALK show episode list here, as well as the Facebook live broadcast. So if you do want to click on it, it's only 3 minutes and 12 seconds. I would recommend you take the 3 minutes and 12 seconds out of your day, especially if you live within a 50-mile radius to Mount Rainier. So we're going to go ahead and hit play so you guys can listen to this, and then after this, in the second segment of the show, after our commercial break, what we're going to do is we'll talk about some of the key points that I wanted to stress to you guys on this Mount Rainier eruption. So, hope you guys enjoy. Surprisingly, a great majority of people, even including Washington State residents, do not know that Mount Rainier is in fact an active volcano. Although the last recorded eruption was around 1894, Mount Rainier is considered to be one of the most dangerous volcanoes on the planet. The dangers of Mount Rainier primarily stem from its massive amount of glacial ice that has been collected from atop its 14,000-foot elevation. This massive amount of glacial ice would be instantly melted by an eruption from Mount Rainier and would immediately turn into massive rushing waters that would collect mud, debris, rock, and other components along with it, as well as the earthquakes that would occur would devastate the entire area surrounding Mount Rainier, forever rendering the landscape unrecognizable. And finally, the asphalt produced from Mount Rainier would not only black out the sky, but would poison the surrounding waters for miles to come, and would cause respiratory damage to all living creatures that breathe it in. Because of the amount of glacial ice, not much lava would be witnessed from Mount Rainier. Instead, the ice would be turned into a rushing river that would collect everything in its path, reaching speeds of upwards of 100 miles per hour.
Much of this was witnessed during the eruption of Mount St. Helens, as well as the devastation that was seen afterwards and felt for years to come. Those rushing lahars, once settled, immediately hardened much similar to concrete. In fact, the lahars from Mount Rainier are predicted to reach such a massive degree that during an eruption, the lahars would instantly reach and mix into the Nisqually River and the Cowlitz River, which immediately surround Mount Rainier. At this point, lahars would spread further rapidly, mixing into the Puyallup River, the White River, and the Carbon River, taking out roadways and reaching towns with major populaces within just the first few hours. From the last major eruption from Mount Rainier, valleys were formed which are now occupied by roughly 80,000 residents. These valleys would make perfect lahar zones during a Mount Rainier eruption, making it much easier to collect debris such as cars and houses and reach Seattle, which is just 54 miles to the northeast. These valleys are also where all the major highways and freeways are formed, such as 410, 512, 164, and I-5, which would immediately be taken out by the lahars, causing gridlock and trapping residents where they're at. Within just a few hours, the earthquakes and lahars would devastate the region, leaving asphalt to black out the sky and poison major bodies of water. If you live in the state of Washington, especially near Mount Rainier, have a plan. Be prepared. Invest in bottled water, storable foods, gas masks, and even study safe points and exit points and means of safe travel for you and your family during such an event.
Alright, we're going to leave it at that. That's the 3 minutes and 12 seconds, and we're coming up on our 7-minute first segment. So we're going to break for a commercial break. When we get back, I want to share with you some of the factors that are very important to keep into consideration when dealing with a Mount Rainier eruption or potential eruption. What you can do in the meantime to stay prepared and to be prepared if an eruption were to occur, as well as some of the activity that I've done with other contracting groups, such as like Suspicious Observers and the Thunderbolts Project, that show an electromagnetic connection between celestial bodies that are passing through our solar system close to Earth and what they have on earthquakes and volcano eruptions. So stay tuned after this commercial break. We'll be right back. Thanks for listening. Bees Combat Systems at beescombatsystems.com, protecting those who prepare. 801-987-0893 for custom body armor carriers and tactical gear for military, law enforcement, contractors, corporate security, responsible citizens, and border patrol. Bees Combat Systems at beescombatsystems.com. 801-987-0893. Alright, welcome back to our second half of our 5th episode of our second season of TACTALK. I'm your host, Alden Morris. So, the first half of the show, we just listened to a video that I did back in 2015 on surviving a Mount Rainier eruption. And one of the things I want to point out here while we have at least 5 minutes for our second segment is if you live in the area, I'm talking like 50 to 60 miles from Mount Rainier, with an hour's drive, kind of a deal. You do need to be aware that Mount Rainier is considered what's called a stratovolcano. Not just a regular volcano, but a stratovolcano. That's because it's got a 14,000 foot elevation and it reaches up into the stratosphere. Especially if there is an eruption. The eruption wouldn't be like other volcano eruptions you see around the world. Like a lot of the eruptions off the coast of Japan, or some of them over in Hawaii right now, which are also part of the Ring of Fire, by the way. Same with Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier is also part of the Ring of Fire on the Pacific Ocean here. A stratovolcano mushrooms like an atomic bomb or a hydrogen bomb when they're lit off. When those mountains erupt, or when those volcanoes erupt, they hit that stratosphere so hard with so much force that the force obviously can't leave our atmosphere and go into space. But they do get trapped. Particles do get trapped up there, up in the atmosphere. They have the ability, depending on wind flow and wind direction, have the ability to go quite far when it comes to the ashfall. So on that note, there's so much ice up there, it's not likely that you're going to see lava coming down from Mount Rainier like you would see in a Hawaiian volcano eruption. Instead, you're going to see a lot of immediate steam, which is going to be mixed with rock and be immediate melted ice. And the melted ice, those glaciers that sit atop Mount Rainier year-round that you can visit in the summertime and see snow, those contribute to the flow of the local rivers. So the Cowlitz River and the Nisqually River, the Green River, some of those rivers that are just at the immediate base of Mount Rainier itself are only really fueled by glacier melt. And though we have seasons that they go up and down in height and things like that. So keep that in mind, that those rivers are going to become the zones, the lahar zones for lahars, which is the equivalent to lava, but in a Pacific Northwest sense. It's just going to be a mixture of, water and mud and rock and debris, trees, everything you can imagine. And the beauty about that is it works like cement, but faster. So let's say you're on I-5, you're between Tacoma and Seattle, say you're at the Dome, and the lahars just take over that. And even better yet, is another example. You're on Highway 410, or no, I take that back, 512, heading down to Puyallup. It goes downhill. If you're familiar with this area, you'll know that just past Canyon, you'll go down the Puyallup Hill before you hit like Bonnie Lake and things like that. That area will be under lahars because it goes down in depth and sea elevation. It becomes lower, and it falls right into a lahar zone. We've actually built those freeways and those highways on previous lahar zones. Lahars, once they cover an area, they immediately harden like cement. So within an hour, if you're in your car and it's gone over you, and you're trying to crawl out of this, it's gonna harden. I mean, there's no finding bodies for a couple days at least if they've been covered and buried by these things alive. So they will harden quickly, because you have to think about it, all that mud. Once that moisture leaves that area and everything else has time to settle, and that moisture's continued forward with the other lahars and everything's become blocked and trapped, like I said, it becomes hard like clay, like cement. Moving on, the ash flow is going to be, even if you're not in an immediate lahar zone, you're not going to have clean water sources unless you have bottled water, and in very intriguing ways to filter the water. And we're talking like traditional filtration systems, inside the house filtration systems, using 50-gallon drums of charcoal and sand and gravel to really get the filtration out. And then you're boiling the water, and then you're doing the whole the cleaning pills and everything like that. Other than that, bottled water. There's gonna be so much ash flow that going outside will literally could literally kill you in a slow, painful way, because of all the rock, the glass, everything that's gonna be ground down into such a fine debris and then floating in the air. Especially again, depending on windfall and wind direction, and wind flow. I mean, that's gonna determine if it's safe for you to come outside, if it's safe for you to collect water, or if you have to literally stay indoors or even evacuate, because not even all houses are going to be foolproof to be able to keep all that ash out. I mean, once that one door opens, your whole place is exposed and contaminated. So, and the scientists have said that Mount Rainier is about 400 years overdue for a large eruption. I guess the last eruption was recorded sometime in the early 1800s, back before our state was fully formed as a federal state. Back when pioneers are still kind of discovering this area, these passes. You had the Oregon Trail kind of going on prior to the Civil War, things like that. This was just territory at that time. But from what documents have said, with interactions with the local native tribes, who named it Rainier, I believe, and Rainier stands for Sleeping Giant. I guess their last recording was sometime in 1812 for the last minor eruption of Mount Rainier. Just something that kind of just got everyone's attention. Nothing that was so chaotic and so changing of the landscape, the surrounding landscape, that nothing was taken into note that showed landscape change. So obviously it was a minor eruption, and so scientists are saying that we're about 400 years overdue for a large eruption. So do keep that in mind too, that is the fact that it's a stratovolcano. Also, it's the second largest volcano on the entire planet Earth. Second largest stratovolcano. So look that one up too. I got the links in the video, which I'll be providing. And then another one that leads me up to, since we're coming up on our 6 minutes here, we got about 3 minutes left. One thing that this last factor that I feel that's important leads me on to a lot of the contracting groups that I've worked with, and that's stress transfer zones. So although Mount Rainier is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, What's happening on the west side of the Pacific Ring compared to the east side has an effect on each other. They're all connected through what's called stress transfer zones, and those are underground. They transfer heat, they transfer energy, they transfer gases, they transfer vibrations. This is where we get tectonic plate readings, things like that. And those are connected. For example, Mount Rainier is connected to Mount St. Helens. So if Mount St. Helens has a minor eruption and it backs up into itself, those stress transfer zones can actually go up into Mount Rainier and give Mount Rainier the eruption it's looking for. So those stress transfer zones do they're like tree roots. They sense each other, they feel each other, they get exchange stress and energy to each other. And because it's happening underground, those stress transfer zones are happening underground, and they do affect one another. It does happen as above as so below. So everyone knows that phrase. In space, when celestial bodies come into our solar system, they have what's called an electromagnetic effect on our planet. So, for example, I've worked with Ben Davidson out of the Suspicious Observers. I've been tuning into his YouTube channel for years now. I still continue to subscribe, still continue to watch his updates, have contributed my work and my landing, and have gotten great ideas from him. And what he does is he focuses on earthquake prediction models that stem from studying the sun. So solar flares, sunspots, coronal mass ejections, coronal holes, all on the KT index, or KP index, that measure different waves of these solar waves that come into our Earth and our atmosphere from the sun itself. And those have an effect once they hit Earth, depending on the strength of the focus, whether it was a coronal mass ejection or an actual X-class solar flare. Those actually have an impact on earthquake prediction models here on Earth. So, for example, if a solar flare hits Earth, let's say an X-class solar flare, because you can already see that the trajectory of it's going to cause the aurora borealis to ignite up. It causes those electromagnetic charges up at the northern part of our planet. Depending on where it hits at what time, you can see changes in tectonic plate movement from the energy and the electromagnetic connection from our sun. So he's done a great job for the last 6-7 years. I'll leave his link information down at the bottom of the video as well. So that way you guys can tune into Suspicious Observers. And that leads me to mentioning the Thunderbolts Project. Those guys are really good about explaining, for example, how Venus came into our solar system, how the Greeks marked her as the birth of Aphrodite, and how the Romans named her Venus, things like that. So Thunderbolts Project is a great one to listen to. It really clarifies a lot of the research. If you don't understand anything I'm saying, for example, if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, watching those two guys, and they're very entertaining, a lot more entertaining than I can be right now. They have the budget to be entertaining. So tune into those guys. It really puts into perspective some of the study that I've done, some of the study that I've contributed. That leads me to Michael Steinbacher, who Thunderbolts Project referred Michael Steinbacher to me. Before he passed away, I worked with Michael Steinbacher, and I raised him $10,000 for his electromagnetic geology study. And we run the EU Facebook group over on Facebook as well with Chad Ginsberg. And that was my contribution to Michael Steinbacher before he passed of prostate cancer, was the fact that I could help raise him that money for his study to go on, which contributed intelligence back to the Thunderbolts Project, who shares it on a mass level, who brightens everybody else's ideas, and just puts it's all come along the last couple of years. It's really exciting work. So that's why I want to dedicate this episode to the Mount Rainier Eruption, survival awareness, all that good stuff, especially if you live in Washington State. I do recommend you guys look up these sources. They're fun, they're entertaining, it's a great time. If you have shows you watch in the evening, watch these shows instead. So we're a lot over our break, or a little over our sketch time. So we're going to end it there. Thanks for listening, guys. If you have any questions on this one, go ahead and just knock. I'm getting knocks right now. Go ahead and just email us, and thanks for listening.